When equals 3, can we trust the IPCC? Hello, and welcome to the first in a series of videos looking at climate change and whether or not things really are as we've been told in the media. In a recent announcement, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak stated that he wanted all school children to learn maths until the age of 18. Now, whether you're a mathematical genius or whether you find that the working out the area of a triangle turns you into a quivering wreck, I think most of us can agree that by definition, 1 does not equal 2. So why is it then that we're also willing to accept that 1 equals 3, when the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says so? Let me explain using the IPCC's own figures. In its 6th assessment report, AR6, the IPCC replaced its RCP scenarios with new shared socioeconomic pathways, or SSP scenarios, to determine what the temperature was likely to be in the year 2100. The 5 scenarios are shown as SSP 1-1.9, 1-2.6, 2-4.5, 3-7, and 5-8.5. The temperature increase ranges from 1.4 degrees C in the year 2100 all the way up to 4.4 degrees C based on scenario SSP 5-8.5. Now, in terms of the scenarios, the figure after the dash relates to the increase in intensity or radiative forcing as a result of changes in the atmosphere by 2100. In physics, there is the Stefan-Boltzmann law, named strangely enough after 2 Austrian physicists, Mr. Stefan and Mr. Boltzmann. It states that the intensity, or radiative forcing, depending on your point of view, which is the amount of energy per second per square metre, is directly proportional to the temperature raised to the 4th power. I is equal to the Stefan-Boltzmann constant times the temperature raised to the 4th power, where Stefan-Boltzmann constant is 5.67 times 10 to the minus 8, or 0.000000567. Rearranging for temperature, we get the temperature is equal to the intensity divided by the Stefan-Boltzmann constant, all raised to a 1/4 power, or the 4th root. You can try this yourself in Excel, but just remember to get the 1/4 power, you need to take the square root of the square root. Here's the energy budget as shown in the 6th assessment report. The greenhouse effect G is defined as the difference between the surface intensity and the thermal outgoing intensity. So the upsurface figure of 398 minus the thermal outgoing figure of 239 gives us a greenhouse effect G of 159 watts per square metre. Now, one of the key things in physics to remember is that energy is always conserved. So the amount of incoming solar radiation is be matched by the amount of solar radiation reflected and the amount of outgoing radiation from the Earth itself. And this we can see in the equation where the 340 watts per square metre of incoming radiation is balanced by 100 watts per square metre being reflected back, and the Earth producing 239 watts per square metre of thermal outgoing radiation. Okay, so now what we want to do is to take the increases in intensity as shown in the previous diagrams and apply this to the Earth's energy budget. So we get an energy budget for the year 2100. As the IPCC state that the solar radiation does not vary over each scenario, the solar forcing is minimal according to the IPCC, the thermal outgoing figure of 239 watts per square metre remains the same in each scenario. Now the greenhouse effect and the surface up figure will increase to keep things in balance. So, if we apply the increase in intensity of the Earth's energy budget for each of the 5 scenarios, we get the following results according to the Stefan-Boltzmann equation. So for SSP 1-1.9, we get a temperature increase of 0.35, not the 1.4 degrees stated by the IPCC. In fact, the IPCC temperature is actually inflated by a factor of 4 in this instance. And the same is true of the other scenarios. for SSP 5A-8.5, we get an increase in temperature of 1.53 degrees centigrade according to the Stefan-Boltzmann equation, not the 4.4 stated by the IPCC, and that's out by a factor of 2.88. Overall, it seems that IPCC appears to be inflating the temperature increase by a factor of around 3. As we shall see later, this is not the only example of the IPCC overstating the impacts of climate change. If we now look at how the temperature of the Earth is calculated within an atmosphere, Earth's albedo is 0.31, so approximately 31% of the sun's energy is reflected. The solar constant S for radiative forcing is around 1370 watts per square metre, though at any one time only a quarter of the Earth can receive it. So this gives us the following equation for Earth's temperature. Temperature is equal to the solar constant times 1 minus the albedo divided by Stefan-Boltzmann constant multiplied by 4, because we only got a quarter of the Earth, and that's all raised to the quarter power. When we put the figures in, what we end up with is a temperature of 255 Kelvin or minus 18 degrees centigrade. As the Earth's average temperature today is around 16 degrees, we end up with a greenhouse effect that would raise temperature by 34 degrees centigrade. NASA actually states in its literature that the temperature would be 33 degrees colder within an atmosphere. But is this correct? Yong, a Chinese physicist, says no. A so-called black body is a perfect emitter, but would not reflect. In other words, the albedo term is 0. If we then put that value as 0 and do the equation again, we actually get a temperature of 278 Kelvin, or 5 degrees C, reducing the greenhouse effect to only 11 degrees centigrade. So again, we seem to have figures inflated by a factor of 3. However, this calculation is entirely theoretical. The Earth does have an atmosphere, so it doesn't matter if the proponents of anthropogenic warming are correct, but the bigger figure does suit their purposes better. I also want to look at equilibrium climate sensitivity. This is defined by the IPCC as the magnitude of the long-term global surface air temperature increase in response to a doubling of the atmospheric CO2 concentration after the planetary energy budget is balanced. In other words, it's the temperature increase we can expect for CO2 doubling. After considerable discussion on the various methods of determining ECS, in section 7.55 on page 1006, the IPCC concludes that the most likely value of ECS is 3 degrees centigrade, though there is a very likely range of 2 degrees to 5 degrees. Now, the greenhouse effect 2.0 works by raising the level at which the Earth's radiation escapes to space. The table below shows the rise in CO2 and the level at which radiation escapes. Temperature decreases at approximately 6.5 Kelvin per kilometre in the troposphere. So, in 1850, pre-industrial times, CO2 was 280 parts per million. Today, in 2023, we managed to hit the figure of 420 parts per million, which is a 50% increase in the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere since 1850. The height in 1850 at which radiation escaped was 5.4 kilometres, and today it's 5.5 kilometres. So that's an increase of 100 metres, or 0.1 of a kilometre. So if the temperature decreases at 6.5 Kelvin per kilometre in the troposphere, we can reasonably expect the increase in temperature, which is balanced because by the increase in the Earth, to be 0.65 degrees. So, when we ever do get to the point of doubling CO2 with a 560 parts per million, then we can expect, a reasonable expectation is that we'd have another 100 metres at which radiation escapes up. So that would give us 5.6 kilometres height at which radiation escapes, and an increase in temperature of 1.3 Kelvin. The second table on this page shows the ECS values from a number of leading scientists. All of them are considerably lower than the IPCC. So yet again, the IPCC seems to be overstated by a factor of around 3. It's also worth noting that the climate model that most closely replicate the past 40 years of temperature are those that have a low ECS. So, we've looked at 3 examples: Earth's energy budget, Earth's temperature without an atmosphere, and the equilibrium climate sensitivity, where the IPCC and NASA seem to overstate the effects of anthropogenic warming by a factor of 3. Now, if climate change really isn't as significant as these bodies claim, then net zero will be no more than an incredible act of self-harm for the West. While the United Kingdom has cut emissions by over 40% since 1990, CO2 emissions worldwide have risen by a corresponding 40% in the past 2 decades. There really is no need for Western nations to cut any further until China, who's increased its CO2 emissions by 381%, and India by 291%, do likewise. In the next video, we will look at the absorption spectrum of the greenhouse gases to see whether or not CO2 is as bad as we've been led to believe. Thank you, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you.